7 minutes in, I'm studying Japanese while simultaneously like cleaning the apartment with my feet and also doing my taxes with my butt cheeks or something. So I clearly don't want to do that, but I also like if all I do in a day is like watch TV and hang out, at the end of the day, I'm like, why do I bother like living that day? Like I might as well have just not lived that day. Hello. Welcome to Harmony Toolbox Shed, episode 2, featuring Ben Gabbai, Benjamin Gabbai. Booyah.
Yeah.
So why don't we start off with just like you introducing yourself briefly so that people know who you are?
Sure. So I'm Ben Gabbai. I was born in New Jersey. When I was 15, my parents moved to Israel and they brought me with them. And since then I've been here. And I don't know what other things I could say.
How did you get values pilled? How did you become inculcated in the interest of values?
That's a good story. So I guess I'll continue my biography. After I came to Israel, I learned in a religious high school. And then afterwards, I kind of went towards the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community. And I was completely offline and I was studying Talmud many hours a day. I got married. And at a certain point, I decided I wanted to broaden my horizons and get some sort of job options. So I started taking a bachelor's in education. And there was a course from somebody there about the internet. And he was just giving us some numbers in one of his first courses. And I went into trauma almost just from hearing the proportions of what was going on online, the advertising world, whether it was pornography, like all these things just like blew my mind, the proportions. And I went into physical shock. And through that, I found humane tech because I was looking for solutions. So first, I remembered reading in high school this Neil Postman guy, and there was this TED talk that I chanced upon, and I got to humane tech, and I took one of the first versions of the human systems class, and I was just like, wow. And it changed my life in many, many ways. And I just stayed in touch with the people, with Nathan, very much in the beginning, and then yeah, that's how it started.
Cool. And so how did the whole career thing pan out? Are you teaching now or?
That's a good question. So I taught. So first of all, I didn't finish my bachelor's yet. I'm almost done.
Okay.
But I did teach 1 year. I did teach 1 year. I taught fourth grade, and it was not so good for me. It was not values aligned at all.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm still passionate about education.
Yeah.
Not teaching in a school.
Yeah. I hear you. And there's a big difference between like learning and education. But that's for a different podcast. So by the way, it's really funny. Yesterday, Emily, my partner, put the last Harmony Toolbox Shed on an iPad next to my dog because my dog has been having a hard time falling asleep. So she put it on. It's like a noise machine. And then after the video finished, the next one that went on was like the world's most boring podcast about like improving your LSAT scores. I was like so offended by that. I was like, man, is this really that boring that like that's recommend? Anyways, I guess I'll work on my art form of trying to make these podcasts more interesting over time. But so teaching was not about, tell me more about what your values are. One of the like main goals for me for this podcast / video series is basically to just get in a lot of reps basically of talking to people about their values so that, my own and other people's internal model for like what's a good value, like what kinds of people have what kinds of values, what's a slightly different version of this value, that sort of building that kind of intuition and wisdom.
Cool. Would you like a rare niche value or one that you think might be more commonly shared?
Up to you. Yeah, what we should talk about both. We spent a couple of
Do
minutes
both.
talking about it. Yeah.
Cool. So I'll start with a more common one. This is one that I'm working on. So it's like a value that I want to live by, and sometimes I succeed, but not
Uh-huh.
always. But it's about approaching conflicts with family, especially with my wife, really, because I have a lot more trust with her than anybody else. Um, in a way where I really notice my own emotions. I
Mm,
really allow myself to feel them and I communicate them really
mm,
clearly. And this is just like very different way of living. Like the contrast is the way that I do naturally if I use my self-awareness is that I really bottle up all negative emotions and then I
yeah.
become like really icy and cold and bitter for
Yeah.
hours. It's a bad way to live.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun. Yeah, I relate to that
Um,
a lot.
it's scary, but it's worth it.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting. My values are like more abstract, I feel like. Like that one that you said, I feel like that's kind of like Joe Joe Edelman style of values articulation where it's like really
Mhm.
dialed into like a specific kind of like um situation that you can like identify.
I've
Whereas
been
like
influenced by
my
my teacher.
say what?
I say I've been influenced by my teacher.
Yeah, yeah. My values are more like I have one that's like kind of close to that, but it's just connection with others. Um, and then I wrote a boundary on it, which is like connection with others when it helps me feel grounded and loved and like live laugh love kind of thing. And so like as a result from that, like, oh well, I better be honest with people about how I'm feeling and I better approach conflict in this sort of like self-knowing way. But it's kind of like I don't have an entire value like sort of articulated dedicated to that, which I think is interesting to talk about, like how granular should we get with values. I guess it kind of depends on what the value's for. Like,
Yeah. I think there's also risks in both directions. So like when you get too granular
mhm,
and you forget that it's also very dynamic and that you
mhm.
tend to, as you live by values, gain wisdom and find better ways of living, you can
Yeah,
kind of get stuck with like
yeah,
putting these expectations upon yourself when you get too granular. And when you're more
yeah,
abstract, you don't. And when you're too abstract, this is from my own
yeah,
experience, sometimes you just don't know what to do. Like
yeah,
it doesn't work always as a good like a good signpost to kind of show you the path.
yeah,
It's kind of just like you're not there. Oh crap, what do I do?
yeah. I sometimes I use a metaphor of saying values are kind of like a compass. It like tells you where to go. And so yeah, it needs to have a level of precision that it can disambiguate between like a mountain over here and a mountain over there. Okay.
Right. Um, well, I think it's interesting that surfaces was about like clarity. Like that's a very like intellectual clarity. I really like it when
Mm,
ideas are really clear and contrasted. So I love the question of what are the trade-offs between high resolution and low resolution, and
mm,
like having this honesty about which ones, what do we get from each one? What's the difference? What do we lose from each one? There is a
yeah.
trade-off. It's not like wishy-washy. So I like approaching ideas like that. And
Mhm. Yeah, I don't personally have anything that sounds like clarity in my values, um, which I kind of have been like regretting lately. Like lately I've been feeling like I kind of feel like maybe I have this value of simplicity or like not having my life be too complicated, because I think that most of the time I get stressed out lately, it's because I've made my life too complicated. Like I've signed up for too many things and then I'm like, like I must now disappoint someone because I'm not capable of doing all the things I signed up for. Now, like, how do I break it to them? And like now I feel like I'm being a loser by disappointing this person. So I feel like
It's like leisure, right?
no, well, that doesn't sound good. I don't want to be leisurely. um, yeah, maybe some sort of clarity of purpose would be helpful to have.
That's interesting because I feel like leisure is a good word. Like, doesn't have. I think it has like a negative vibe for you, and for me,
Which one?
leisure is like
Leisure?
leisure. That's one of my values. Yeah, I want to live a life where I can like wake up and have anything specific to do, and I'll just see what happens, and I could just sit and read a book and think, and maybe I'll think of something inconsequential. It's like that's something that I like.
Yeah, I feel like, well, I'm still trying to find a balance that works for me, but I kind of want to like, well, I have a clear articulation of what taking it too far means. Okay, wake up, immediately go take a shower in 30 seconds, walk my dog in 2 minutes, brush my teeth in 17 seconds, and then 7 minutes in, I'm studying Japanese while simultaneously like cleaning the apartment with my feet and also doing my taxes with my butt cheeks or something. It like constantly, super hyper productive all the time. So
Right.
I clearly don't want to do that, but I also like if all I do in a day is like watch TV and hang out, at the end of the day, I'm like, why do I bother like living that day? Like I might as well have just not lived that day. If it didn't
Mhm.
like if I wasn't able to
Yeah.
be creative or like make something, I guess. I feel like I really feel fulfilled when I'm making stuff and like being creative. Are there any other values that you're interested in talking about? Maybe one that came up recently in your daily life and how you noticed it was coming up?
Well, I think the one I mentioned before about being really transparent with my emotions came up earlier today, and that was really meaningful. There was another aspect about it, which was this kind of openness when I'm communicating with other people
Mm-hmm.
and really being open to their dynamics, to their change.
Mm-hmm.
Happened twice today. One time was I was pulling out with my car and somebody was honking at me because I was driving slowly, which I was. I'm not a very good driver, so I drive slowly. And then he kind of pulled up and he's like, "Well, you're not rushing anywhere?" And he was like half joking, half mocking. Um,
Okay.
and I was kind of open to the dynamic. This is my hypothesis, at least, is that when he was honking, he was really upset. Like you don't honk jokingly. People don't really do that. Then I guess after he saw me and he saw my face and my sheepish grin, I suppose, he was like, he turned it into a joke instead. It's like a sign of a little bit of regret. It's like, I didn't mean to be so aggressive. You know what? I'll make a joke out of it. Not a very funny one, but I'll try anyway.
Yeah.
And I think being open to that dynamic and accepting that shift in people is something I really value. Keeping this open mind and recognizing that people can really change in a split second, and that
Yeah.
you have to dance with that.
I like that. It's interesting. You've got like three different values that are all kind of like nuanced, detailed aspects of that.
Yeah, I definitely tend towards the granular.
Yeah. It would certainly help you be a good teacher to be open to dynamics of other people that are your students. So I want to talk a little bit about this topic of like values and religion. I am not
Yeah.
religious at all. Well, actually, that's maybe not true. I sometimes feel like I should pray about something because I was raised like in a Protestant Christian church until I was about 13. And then my parents were like, okay, do you want to keep going to church? And I was like, no. And honestly, it was just like it was like the whale, like people being eaten by whales and stuff, that I was like, I just don't buy it. Like, I don't buy that that happened. And so I was like, that makes me distrust everything else. And so
Mhm.
I was basically like, I'm out. And then I haven't really gone, back since then, except for this feeling of like, sometimes when stuff is really, really bad, it feels like the only thing I can do is pray. And then in that way, I
Yeah.
guess I'm still a little bit religious. um, but I'm very interested in this idea of the intersection of religions and values, because that to me seems like the part that I resonate with most about religions is the values that are sort of encoded in.
Yeah, I agree. So maybe taking your story, I would say that it's not like it's actually very common for people
Yeah.
who grow up in religious places, all religion, this scientific perspective or the secular outlook. And then all these myths or stories or whatever it would be, narratives, they kind of people feel really skeptical about them.
Mhm.
And this makes this like wholesale of like throwing everything away kind of thing going on.
Mhm.
It's like common all across the board, every religion, every institutionalized religion is like crying, like, where's our youth going?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that part of this has to do with this failure to communicate the values in the religion
Mhm.
and kind of highlighting this other perspective. And so the way I would kind of present it is I think that this rationalist, utilitarian, philosophic, atheist, analytic philosophy kind of school of thought, so
Mhm.
like, Anglo-American, has one frame where they are constantly asking the question of reality. Is it true? Being really precise about what the words mean and highlighting that aspect of people and of civilizations, and leads to a lot of individualism. And I
Yeah.
think that religions themselves, their frames, how they actually see the world is different. And
Mm.
sometimes they get confused and they actually adopt that frame and they make it like very black and white. So like they adopt the frame, they're like, no, this did actually happen. And if you don't believe it literally, you're a heretic.
Yeah.
And I think that's adopting the outsider frame. Actually, that's like the Enlightenment frame. That's not the way most religions saw themselves historically, as communities, much more first and foremost, with a shared truth in the sense of a direction in life and a mission,
Yeah.
um, with, with historical truths as well,
Yeah.
but not only. So I feel like highlighting the values in religion is really something that all religions should do more. I have a value on like having roots, people being connected to their roots. I like to connect people to their roots. I like being connected to mine,
Interesting.
whatever it is. Yeah. And I
That's
think
really
that,
I feel sad that I feel extremely disconnected from my roots. I feel like I don't have roots.
yeah, that
I
feels
don't
sad to
I
me
don't know
also.
what my roots even are. Like, I guess uh I'm Irish, like, technically, but like I don't know Irish. I've never been to Ireland. I don't even know any I like from Ireland people.
I, well, I'll tell you how I see it for myself. Maybe like I see part of my roots is all of Western tradition in general, even though my father was Egyptian and my mother is Iranian
Oh,
from Iran. Um, but I grew up in America. And so a lot of who I am, it's a dynamic thing. My
yeah.
heritage and my culture comes from the Western world. And so like tracing that back, whether it's like Greek philosophy or even reading like I don't know, John Stuart Mill, that's part of my heritage.
Interesting.
And like I see it that way, yeah. Um, I'm definitely much more rooted in Judaism. Like that is like the text that I'm absorbed in, the community that I'm part of 100%. Yeah, I would encourage you so much to like to reach out to roots, like historical and ideas and places and everything.
Mm. What does what could you say what it feels like to you to be connected to your roots?
Oh, it's a very dramatic relationship, like lots of drama. Um, I'll start with the negative. Sometimes there's confusion and bewilderment and anger
Mm,
and disappointment, where sometimes I can know things about my nation or texts, and I'll just be like, oh man, what was going on that somebody thought this? Or sometimes there's a certain poverty in the textual tradition, which is one of the main ways of Judaism that the connection is through like texts, religious texts. It's like there's like a big gap here. Like, why was nobody writing about this? The Buddhists are writing about this. And sometimes there's that feeling.
mm,
And then on the brighter side, which is the general one, there's this really strong feeling of identity and part
mm,
of being an organic being. So I really feel like I'm absorbing the things that are appropriate for me,
mm,
and I'm part of that heritage moving forward.
mm.
So passing it on to my children and my community around me and my friends, like reading one thing, thinking of an idea, an interpretation, a
Yeah.
novel idea, and it's like I feel like I'm part of. I'm joining into this like huge
Yeah.
body.
That sounds awesome. I feel like I was just this body dropped into like a vast plane of existence with like no context or surrounding. And like I can just be blown away at any moment by like a strong wind into the tides of eternity. And like
Wow.
it's like the opposite of being rooted if you interpret that literally. It's like
Yeah.
I'm basically in, I feel like I'm in outer space. Obviously, I mean, like I have a family, I have loved ones, but it feels like I've found them on this like vast plane of like existential nothingness.
It's cool. I think I heard somewhere that there's actually like a tradition of American. I'm with my mobile phone now as a hotspot. Hopefully, it'll be better
Okay.
now.
You were just saying that it's a American phenomenon, I think, to feel
It's a tradition. It's like part of the
tradition.
American heritage. Is to
Okay.
go through this floatingness. Like it's everybody kind of goes through it. I don't remember where I read that, but
Yeah, that's freedom. I have a question, and it's kind of a loaded question, so we don't have to talk about it. But I'm curious: do you think that institutionalized religions, like leaning into and embracing values, do you think that that will, for example, like conflicts? Do you think that that would help with religious conflicts around the world, where different members of different disputes around the world that have, do you think it would make different sorts of religious and cultural groups, do you think it would help them navigate conflict better if they were more if they thought about their sources of meaning as more about more like values driven versus these sorts of like I forget what you referred to it earlier as, but like, you know, like this specific thing happened here, and if you don't believe that, you're a heretic.
so I don't know what I'm not enough of. I don't have enough knowledge about like world religions and how they're going and what costs they have. So I can't say. But from the little I see, I think it would help in some ways. I think it might also conflicts in that are kind of like low down in some ways. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it would also it definitely be more realistic
Yeah.
community and people are talking about their values because people usually aren't like, oh, your value's stupid. People are more like, oh, your value, I
Yeah.
never tried that. Like that's like the more like it's hard
Yeah.
to be like your value stinks, but yeah, I think for politics and ideologies, it would also definitely make a big difference. Imagine like political discussions where someone's like, "Oh yeah, well I belong, I'm a conservative because I really value rootedness, and that's what conservatism means for me."
Hmm.
I think there'd be few progressives who would be like, "Oh, that's terrible." They'd be more
Yeah.
like, "Oh, what does that mean for you?" And if progressives like, "Oh, I'm progressive because I see suffering in the world, and it's like really important for me to change things to make I value that. It's like, oh, can't be against that. Maybe we can start talking about the best
Yeah,
ways. And it's like,
how
first
can
of
you
all, there's like
be?
this common ground.
Yeah. I prefer to let people suffer. I think it's morally fine for everyone to suffer.
Right.
Yeah, I had a really good I'm a broken record about this one, but I had a very good meaning healthy conversation with my mom about abortion.
Hmm.
She's a lot more sort of like, well, I actually shouldn't say a lot. She's more sort of like pro-life, I guess. I don't know what the right
Hmm.
terminology is, or I don't know
Yeah.
if it's okay to call it pro-life or whatnot, but
I-
she's more on the like less abortion side. I'm a little bit more on the, I basically say like it's a personal moral decision to me in my mind. And like I
mhm.
do think that laws should try to model like morals, but I basically don't think that we can possibly know enough about this situations at hand to say like, oh well, you just like you cannot get like there's no possible justifiable cause to like have an abortion at like X.
Mhm.
So I'm more on the side of like expand the woman's right to choose basically, and not
Mhm.
govern this with law. And I do still think that there's probably situations where like it's maybe more or less appropriate to get an abortion. But I talked to my mom about it, and she said, oh well, she's worked in labor and delivery for 20 years, so it's very close to her heart. Like she
Mhm.
obviously the reason like her whole identity is like very shaped around like babies being born and like helping them enter the world. So the idea of, like
Right.
having an abortion, it's like pretty related. And her thing is basically like, I think that it's about respect for life and like honoring the the value of life. And she's like, I feel like if people are getting abortions, like um, it's no big deal, basically, then
Mhm.
that's not giving the appropriate amount of respect and like honor towards life. And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. And then it was so much easier to talk about like, okay, well, what do we need to know about a situation to like discuss in a lot more of a human way versus like, I feel like where the debate typically goes is like, oh, well, everyone's going to get abortions anyways, they'll just be less safe, or someone else will be like, it's
Yeah.
murder. And like these sorts of conversations typically don't really go anywhere. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
just not good enough at arguing.
No, you're right. I think there's a lot to that. That when you express your own value and you recognize the other person's value, it's just a different conversation. In utopia, can you imagine two politicians talking about passing a law and they're like, well, these are the values that are at stake on each side.
Yeah.
Doing this will help support this value, but it might put this other one at risk and make it harder. And this one supports this value, but it constricts this. And
Yeah.
we have to decide upon this. And using our judgment, we've decided that this is the one that is more important to us. Be like, wow.
I wonder if we could even have that though, because I feel like some politicians will end up being so utilitarian. Like I feel like Andrew Yang would totally be okay with like, making everyone, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but he would probably be okay with doing some weird esoteric stuff if it happened to result in like everybody having like a better economy or better health outcomes or whatever. Like he seems
Mhm.
very open-minded. I don't have
Mhm.
a pro Zoom account, so this Zoom is going to be ended pretty soon. But
All right.
it was really nice talking to you, and I hope we get to talk
Yeah.
more in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awesome. I'm sorry about all the cutoffs.
No, no problem. Yeah. Let me know if there's anything else you feel like you want to add to the video. Maybe you can record a video if you have anything else to say and send it to me, and I'll add it to the end.
Uh, yeah, I just loved it. This is really fun. I like this a lot. If I think of something else, I'll tell you for sure.
Cool. Have a
Thank
good
you
night.
so much, man. It was a great opportunity.